Okay, and welcome to the 19th letter in the series of Copperplate Majuscules. This is for the letter S. Today I'm using a Nico G nib in an oblique holder with some watercolor ink. I've talked about Nico G nibs before, so it shouldn't be something that's super new to everyone. I'm actually quite far down my paper, and there we go. There we go. Yeah, Nico G nibs, excuse me, are very, very durable. And they're a lot more forgiving than more vintage nibs. But your trade-off, as you can, oh my gosh, focus on the writing, there we go. But the trade-off, as you can see, is that you're going to get a much smaller difference between thick and thin lines. I mean, I have quite a lightweight script already. So my thick lines are not as thick as others. So I tend to get a very, very small variation between thick and thin with a Nico G. But never mind. So with an S, you can see that it can be done all in one stroke, which is absolutely fine. I prefer to do it in two, purely because there are variations of an S where you start below your X height line, and you can, I don't know what is wrong with this nib, there we go, and you can go all the way up to then come back down to then deal with your bit afterwards. I don't like this. I mean, I like the motion a lot, and I like the fact that it can bring flourishing down to the bottom, because that's a rarely used area for flourishing. I do like that, but as you can see, it forces your hand with doing the last bit of the letter, so that big swell on the left. So that for me, oh gosh, I haven't even picked a pen, Jesus. Okay, yeah, for your, what will we go with? We'll go with the red. We'll go with the red. Right, whatever. So you can see here that I'm trying to use whatever line I've got here to bisect this contained oval right here, which I've sort of managed to do. I haven't got 90-degree angles, but I'm never going to get 90-degree angles here unless I swung this completely really wide and then did a huge swoop up. That's not something I'm really willing to do. I don't feel like it's just not going to look right, and it would need to be so carefully planned, especially if it's going to theoretically be closer to that. I find that very hard to do backwards. I never really know what I'm doing with the big swell here, so I do prefer to start from the top. So my preferred way is the way here. So it's starting from 12 again. So if I put start at 12, so you're starting at 12 o'clock on the clock. So everything from there downwards is you going down with your pen. Not necessarily a downstroke, because it doesn't necessarily need that pressure, but yeah, it just gives you that little bit more control. I think with a straight holder, that flourishing can be harder, purely because when the pen is straight and you're holding it straight, I tend to be able to see less. So I don't know, that might just be me because of my writing angle, but I do prefer an oblique pen for flourishing. Okay, so if I'm starting at 12 o'clock, that means that both of these are downstrokes. There is no universal line of beauty in an S. An S is a very strange sort of concept. There are a million ways to do an S. I would say that it's advisable for your middle third to be along the slant line, or at least as close to it as you can currently get, because obviously you've got to S the line, so you've got to go backwards, then down, then backwards again. So it's kind of hard to get all of that information in. So you can see I've tried to assimilate part of this with the slant line, as long as overall, so if I do a little line right here, if I carried on this line, you can see I'm bending around it, but overall my downstroke of my letter is along the slant line, even if it goes a little bit to the right and to the left. If we averaged it out, it should be along the slant line. If you've got something up here, that means that your S is too heavy in the basic form of your letter, then it's going to make it look as if your letter is leaning, and you don't want that, because the rest of your words, so if I just put an O right here, the rest of your words are going to be along the slant line. So if you've got something that's leaning, it's going to either cross over the top of, or it's going to intersect with the space that that letter has. So you need to be careful with that. You can see that I've got a contained oval, very obviously, right here. And I have another one right here. And I have a bigger one, which is basically the entire left side of my letter. So effectively, have I got space for this? I can put this further down. So effectively, for an S, you're effectively doing one big oval, like that, with just a something here. That's then going to follow that. We've then got a sort of spiral thing happening, so we should be bisecting that area. You can see that's what I've roughly done here. So I've got the same amount of space on this side as I've got on that side, roughly. And my flourish, I'm also using somewhere here. I did bisect it, I did go much lower, but I've got a horizontal oval that points that way and to that point along the slant line. Okay, that's the rough sort of shape of the S. And S is brilliant because it's one of those letters where, because it's not dictated by the like standard strokes, it's one of those weird letters that is really not like any others. It means that there's a lot of space to play with. So your legibility box for an S it really depends on the letter. I know I've seen a lot of odd entry strokes for an S. If I do one down here, so let me just get this right in my head. It's gonna go up, so I have seen an entry stroke for an S which goes all the way up to the top line and then curves back over. I have seen this in a couple of other letters, like an E particularly as well. I'm not a super big fan of this because I feel like it just adds a lot of drama where it's just not necessary for me. If it's something that you really like the look of, then please by all means go for it. I've seen, you know, professional calligraphers from, you know, in the Universal Penman that use this stroke. It's not an unheard of thing. But basically from your major slant line, so mine's somewhere here, we're going an equal amount of distance this way as we're going that way. Yeah, so however far I go that way is how far I go that way. You don't want it to look unbalanced because then you're creating too much drama near this crossover. So if I did it again, but did it that way, you can see it's creating too much up here and it's creating too much attention. I really should keep like a black pen on me at all times, really. I keep saying this and then I don't do it. So right here on my slant line, I'm going much further this way than I'm going that way. And it looks too busy in this area. And it's going to draw attention to that instead of to the beautiful form of your S. It's also creating too small of a gap here compared to the massive gap that we've got on this side. I mean, you could flop this back over. There's no reason that you couldn't, and keep all that narrowness equal the whole way through. But I feel like that is then setting you up for very, very narrow minuscules. So if I had this right here, the rest of my word would have to be very, very, very narrow to make up for that. Which is fine if that's what you're going for, but I feel like it just bunches things together and it stops things being as legible. You've got to give your letters space to breathe. Oh, and that's just becoming too cluttered for me. So I like to keep things nice and even, nice and open. But hey, we're all human, aren't we? So I would much prefer something like this, where we've got a good amount of space to the left and right. I've obviously tried my best to bisect it, and then that gives me a really, really good amount of space to do my lowercase. So I should have a good amount of width here. It's obvious when you're addressing an envelope if you're running out of space. If that happens to you, if you've got a really long address line, just drop it to the next line. No one is gonna call you out on it. Just don't bunch it together, because then you're losing the beauty of it, and that's really what people are gonna pay you for Copperplate. It is about the beauty of it, the aesthetic nature of it. I've had addresses before where they've had a really long second line, for example, especially if their house has a name rather than a number. And I've just dropped it onto the town line. So I've just continued the address and it looks like it's part of the town. That's absolutely fine. I mean, it's not perfect and we all want everything to be perfect, but it's the lesser of the evils here. Okay, so with an S, I've got a lot of contained ovals. I've also got a crossover here that I'm not quite happy with. You can see it's not bisecting the space. So if you've got something like that, purely because I felt like it wasn't gonna look right dropping that so low, and that's absolutely fine. If you've got something like that, there is no reason why you can't just go back and chop the space into thirds rather than half. Yeah, so you're not bisecting that space, but whatever space you've got left you are bisecting, so that you've got equal thirds. Yeah, okay, so that's absolutely possible. And then I've obviously got that oval pointing to the left, so that's my horizontal oval right there. All right, so an S can be flourished in a lot of ways. Obviously you've seen me doing it a few times. It does depend on what letters you have following it. So if you have an ascender following an S, like the word sly, or I don't know, if you're writing letters to Slovenia or wherever, then I'll just do tissue under my hand. It's so hot and humid today. I can feel the oils on my hand are going to transfer to my paper. But if we put right here, I think I'm in frame, I am, which is fab. Right. So I've got my S right there. You don't have to do it in one stroke if you're not comfortable doing it in one stroke. If you want to start from the 12 o'clock, you absolutely can. Or if you even want to do to the bottom and then stop and then do whatever you're doing on the left, that's absolutely fine. You're then going to have whatever this curve is right here. Oh, is there somewhere I can do it a bit clearer? Here. So whatever this curve is, that's got to be parallel to entry stroke. Okay, so you can see on the bottom one that I've just done, I've tried to keep it as parallel as possible, just tried to echo that that angle. If I have the word like sly, which is the smallest word I can think of with an SL, just off the top of my head. Okay, then I can figure out the top of my ascender later. Okay, so I've got the word sly. Just match those up a little bit better. There we go. And you can see that I've tried to keep my O widths consistent. If I've got this top, then I know that my S is contained to that boundary. So I haven't really got anything that's gonna encroach on my L. I must have cleaned this off like 5 or 6 times now, but never mind. Because it's contained within that boundary, that means that I can pretty much do what I want with my L. So I can create a loop if I want. I can loop my ascender if you're into doing looped ascenders, which in the word sly is kind of nice because then you've got the mirrored ascender and descender. It's probably worth mentioning that, you know, within your ascender and descender, you should have an O width right there. Same here, you should have an O width at the widest part. And it should mirror each other. So if you've got your ascending loops are much wider than your descending loops, for example, they need to mirror each other and look as equal as possible. I'm quite guilty of my descenders being bigger. I think it's because I just enjoy the downstroke more. But hey ho. You can see that I have tried to keep my O's consistent. So I've got an O in here. I've got an O between my S and L. I've got to be careful because my ink is still wet. I don't know why, but it's coming on so thick today that it's still wet, so I've got to be really careful. This is why I normally use watercolor ink, because it dries really quickly, but apparently not today. So you can see I've tried to keep my O's consistent width all the way through in my word. And with an S, the best way that I can sort of say is that it's always going to look heavy on this left side. So it's great if you've got a descender which can help to balance that out. If you need to create something on the top right to balance, you know, whatever, then you absolutely can, just to help that word look a bit less left heavy. Also, it does depend also on your centering as well. With an S, you're going to have to factor in that the whole letter, the only real weight in the letter is on the right hand side. So I've done a little downstroke here, and you can see that in the box, so the box that I've just drawn here, my downstroke is roughly bisecting that box. Yeah, so the weight in your, how am I going to do this? Oh, I've got a post-it right here. That'll do. Hold on. It's still bloody wet, you know. Where can I can do it just here, I think, without it getting awful. Okay. So you can see right here that my downstrokes are here, 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 and here, and there. Yeah, if I extend them all down. I've obviously eyeballed it, but in between all of them, we should have roughly the same amount of space. I've moved that one a little bit far over. I think that should have been a bit more there. But you can see between all of them that I've got roughly an equal amount of space. That one's maybe a little narrow, but that's, I'm sorry, we're all human. So if you're ever concerned that your spacing is not right, then just take a post-it or a piece of paper or kitchen towel or whatever you've got, lay it over half the word so it's cutting out the formations of the word. I know that in some professional classes they say that you've got to stop looking at letters as letters. You need to start breaking them down into their basic strokes. So instead of an A, you're never doing an A, you're doing an entry stroke, an oval, and an underturn. And if you master the basic strokes, then you'll master every single letter. And that's a great way of thinking about it, but it's kind of hard when you have a word and it's so obvious what the letters are, it's kind of hard for us not to read them. That's just how our brains are programmed. So cover half of it, so even if you can't necessarily tell what the words are, and then find out where your downstrokes are. They should be roughly even. Okay, right, I think that's about it for an S. You can drop it lower should you need to, make it a bigger letter. Your legibility box is sort of all over the place, so you can, if you want, drop this much lower, go over your shape. It really doesn't matter. The S shape here is your legibility, but because it's not a basic stroke, it means that there's a lot less sort of confinement that we know of. So you can absolutely go over your shape, yeah, as long as that S bend is really legible, you should be okay. All right, that's about it for an S. Have a nice day.